Exposed. The dark world of black pastors' megachurches. What if I told you some of the most powerful black pastors in the world aren't just preaching the gospel? They're running billion-dollar empires built on fear, manipulation, and blind loyalty. Megachurches with VIP seating, private jets, paid for by struggling members and pastors who live like celebrities while hiding scandals behind stained glass windows. From eating snakes in the name of faith to million-dollar jet requests, the dark side of modern ministry is far more terrifying than you think. This is not the church you thought you knew. Watch till the end and decide for yourself. Is this faith or the biggest spiritual hustle in history? Subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence. Marvin Winans. Marvin Winans wasn't just another pastor, he was gospel royalty. As a member of the legendary Winans family, his voice shaped worship services across America. In 1989, he founded Perfecting Church in Detroit, and it quickly exploded into one of the most influential black megachurches in the Midwest. Thousands filled the sanctuary each week, drawn to his emotional sermons and world-class choirs that sounded like heaven itself. He wasn't just preaching the gospel, he was the soundtrack of black church culture. To the public, Winans represented purity, excellence, and spiritual leadership. But as the crowds got bigger and the church grew richer, the financial shadows began to surface. In 2012, the world was stunned when documents revealed that Pastor Marvin Winans owed the IRS over $1.2 million in unpaid taxes. This wasn't a small accounting error. It was years of financial mismanagement from a man who regularly preached about stewardship, responsibility, and honoring God with money. Even worse, this wasn't the first time church finances were questioned. Insiders claimed millions flowed into the ministry, but very little transparency existed on how it was used. Members began asking, where did the money go? How could a man trusted as a spiritual father ignore financial integrity? Have we mistaken charisma for character? One of the most heartbreaking controversies came when Winans refused to allow unwed mothers to have their babies blessed in front of the congregation. The very place meant to represent grace and redemption became a platform of public shame. Critics blasted him for punishing the vulnerable instead of uplifting them. Many asked how a pastor who sings about mercy could deny it to the women who needed it most. This policy exposed a deeper issue. Was this church about saving souls or protecting image? At the same time, reports claimed certain church leaders lived comfortably while struggling members were told to pray harder. Should a church ever decide who is worthy of love? Over time, more people began accusing Winans of hypocrisy. On stage, he projected holiness, humility, and compassion. Off stage, he was tied to financial scandals, judgmental policies, and an apparent refusal to take responsibility. What makes his story so shocking is not just what he did, but who he was supposed to be. Marvin Winans wasn't a random preacher. He was the voice of gospel purity, the symbol of spiritual excellence. His fall didn't just tarnish his name, it made people question the entire system of celebrity pastors. Because if even he could hide darkness behind the microphone, what about the others? Clarence McClendon. In the early 2000s, Bishop Clarence McClendon was everywhere. Christian TV packed stadium revivals and glossy magazine covers celebrating him as the next great voice of the black church. He pastored Church of the Harvest in Los Angeles, one of the most talked-about megachurches on the West Coast. His sermons were electrifying. His music ministry was powerful, and his image was flawless. To millions, he looked like the perfect man of God. Charismatic, handsome, articulate, and anointed. But behind the stage lights and TV cameras, a shocking personal decision would expose the cracks in his foundation and reveal the dangerous intersection of power, ego, and religion. In 2000, McClendon stunned his entire congregation when he divorced his first wife and married another woman just 7 days later. The scandal shook the church world to its core. Members were blindsided, leaders were speechless, and the story spread through Christian media like wildfire. People weren't just upset about the divorce, it was the speed. 1 week. It made many believe the relationship had already been happening behind the scenes. As the news broke, over half of his congregation walked out feeling betrayed and spiritually manipulated. The backlash was so intense that McClendon had to rename his church to Full Harvest International Church just to escape the stain of the scandal. Would you still trust a pastor who moves on faster than the ink dries on his divorce papers? Instead of stepping back in humility, McClendon doubled down on fame. He joined the controversial reality show Preachers of LA in 2013, showcasing luxury cars, million-dollar homes, designer suits, and even access to private jets. He claimed it was the favor of God. Critics argued it was spiritual materialism. Audiences saw a pastor living like a celebrity, while many of his followers struggled financially. Even worse, former members claimed McClendon used healing lines sections of services where people were promised miracles to strategically raise money. People in desperate need of healing were allegedly guided to give large seed offerings for their breakthrough. What once looked like ministry now felt like marketing. Over the years, McClendon faced multiple financial lawsuits, accusations of unpaid debts, and claims that he mixed spirituality with business deals for personal gain. Each time controversy hit, he framed himself as persecuted rather than accountable. The pattern became clear: divorce scandal, rebrand, luxury profit. What makes Clarence McClendon's story so disturbing isn't just one mistake, it's how he turned controversy into a stepping stone for more exposure. He mastered the art of looking holy while living lavishly. He proved that in the dark world of megachurch empires, charisma can overpower conscience. T.D. Jakes. T.D. Jakes didn't start as a megastar. In 1996, he moved to Dallas with only 50 families following him from West Virginia. But within a decade, he built something no one had ever seen before: a religious empire. The Potter's House. His megachurch cost $45 million to build, and seats over 30,000 people, rivaling sports arenas. Cameras, jumbotrons, professional lighting. This wasn't just church, it was a production. His voice could move millions, and his sermons aired in over 100 million households worldwide. He became more than a pastor. He became a spiritual celebrity. While preaching about humility, Jakes lived in extraordinary luxury. He owns a 14-acre estate in one of the richest neighborhoods in Dallas, complete with an indoor basketball court, home theater, and a custom Bentley worth hundreds of thousands. When invited to speak at events, he reportedly charges $150,000 per appearance. His conferences like Woman Thou Art Loosed and MegaFest generate tens of millions of dollars in economic impact. Some supporters say he deserves it as a successful leader, but others question if a pastor should live like a Fortune 500 CEO. Jakes didn't stop at preaching, he built a media empire. His books have sold over 3 million copies. He created partnerships with Sony Pictures and produced Hollywood films like Jumping the Broom and Heaven is for Real, grossing tens of millions. He blended ministry with entertainment so seamlessly that many forgot where the gospel ended and the brand began. But critics warned that his messages leaned toward prosperity gospel teaching that faith leads to wealth. They argued he turned hope into a product and sermons into sales pitches. His influence was undeniable, but so was the controversy. Despite his success, cracks began to appear. Critics accused him of being more businessman than bishop. In 2024, rumors and allegations surfaced online questioning his internal operations and relationships within the church. Then came the moment that shocked the world. He collapsed from a heart attack while preaching. After recovering, he quietly handed leadership of the Potter's House to his daughter. For the first time, the king stepped back from his throne. The man who built an empire now faced the cost of carrying it. His legacy is powerful but complicated. Lamer Whitehead. Bishop Lamer Whitehead wasn't leading a massive megachurch like T.D. Jakes or Creflo Dollar. In fact, his church in Brooklyn was relatively small, maybe 200 people on a good Sunday. But you wouldn't know that by looking at his lifestyle. Whitehead flooded Instagram with photos of Gucci suits, Hermes bags, Louis Vuitton jackets, diamond watches, and luxury cars. He styled himself like a hip-hop mogul, not a pastor. He even called himself the young bishop, branding faith with street swagger. He preached that success was proof of God's blessing, and if you followed him, you'd be blessed too. His congregation believed him. But behind the designer labels and flashy confidence, something was very wrong. In 2024, the truth exploded. A federal jury found Whitehead guilty of wire fraud, extortion, and making false statements, sentencing him to 9 years in prison. One of the most shocking cases involved a 90-year-old elderly woman who trusted him with $90,000 of her life savings, believing he would help her buy a home. Instead, prosecutors revealed that Whitehead spent the money on luxury clothing and car payments. He even forged bank statements and fake real estate documents to keep the scam going. This wasn't a mistake, this was intentional manipulation from a man standing in the pulpit. In 2022, the world watched in disbelief when 3 armed robbers stormed his church during a live stream. Cameras captured everything as Whitehead immediately laid on the floor and surrendered his gold chains, Rolex and diamond rings worth over $1 million. The viral clip sparked a massive debate. Why was a pastor wearing more jewelry than a rapper? Surprisingly, many of his followers defended him, saying, "Our pastor lives blessed because he teaches us how to be blessed." To them, his wealth wasn't a red flag. It was proof he was anointed. That mindset revealed the deeper issue when materialism becomes theology. Manipulation becomes easy. Even after his conviction, some church members still supported him, convinced he was persecuted, not guilty. This is the true danger, the cult-like loyalty that forms when a pastor becomes an idol. Whitehead mastered the art of blending street culture with prosperity, gospel convincing people that luxury equals divine favor. But in the end, the truth caught up with him. He wasn't a victim. He was a con man in a custom suit. His story exposes a terrifying reality in the dark world of modern megachurch culture. Image often outruns integrity, and many can't tell the difference. Jamal Bryant. Pastor Jamal Bryant built his reputation as the voice of the people. As the leader of New Birth Missionary Baptist Church, one of the most influential black churches in America, he positioned himself as a fearless activist fighting for justice. He led protests, called out corporations, and claimed to speak truth to power. To the public, he wasn't just a pastor, he was a revolutionary. But behind the megaphone and media cameras, a different story was unfolding. Critics say Bryant used activism not as ministry, but as marketing. Every protest built his platform, every speech increased his following, and every social justice stand opened new doors for fame, influence, and profit. Bryant often organized boycotts and rallies against major corporations, presenting himself as the defender of the oppressed. But insiders claim these movements doubled as strategic branding campaigns. The more he fought the system, the more opportunities he gained: TV appearances, speaking engagements, and sponsorships. He started to look less like Martin Luther King Jr. and more like a political influencer. He even used viral moments to boost church membership and donations. Many began asking, was he leading the people or leveraging them? Jamal Bryant's personal life made even more headlines than his sermons. He married Giselle Bryant, star of The Real Housewives of Potomac. Their relationship became a public roller coaster: infidelity, separation attempts at reconciliation, and another breakup in 2021. Multiple affairs were exposed, some allegedly while he was still preaching about purity and marriage. His own congregation felt betrayed. Yet every time he was caught, Bryant framed himself as a flawed man under attack. Instead of accountability, he chose image control. He even joked about past scandals on TV, turning his mistakes into entertainment. Should a pastor still lead when his lifestyle contradicts his message? Bryant mastered one powerful trick. Whenever he faced criticism, he claimed persecution. When conservative commentator Charlie Kirk died, Bryant publicly called him a racist and said he didn't deserve sympathy. When people pushed back, he claimed he was being silenced for speaking truth. He turned every backlash into proof that he was chosen by God and attacked by the enemy. This tactic allowed him to avoid responsibility and keep his followers loyal. But over time, the pattern became clear. Activism scandal, victim card repeat. Jamal Bryant represents a dangerous new model of megachurch leadership: Performative justice, profitable controversy, and moral flexibility disguised as divine purpose. Creflo Dollar. Creflo Dollar built one of the largest and most powerful black megachurches in America. World Changers Church International, with over 30,000 active members and satellite campuses across multiple states. His rise was rapid, fueled by smooth preaching, psychological persuasion, and a message that God wanted you to be rich. His ministry wasn't just spiritual, it was a machine. Offering envelopes were everywhere. Luxury cars filled the church parking lot, and his sermons on sowing and reaping brought in millions. In the 1990s, he built the World Dome, a massive sanctuary costing $18 million, paid in full, debt-free. To the public, he was a financial genius. To his followers, he was proof that faith leads to fortune. But to critics, he was the face of the prosperity gospel, a theology that monetized hope and packaged it as divine truth. Creflo Dollar didn't just preach prosperity, he lived it. He owned a $5 million mansion in Atlanta, luxury cars, and designer suits worth more than some members made in a year. But nothing shocked the world more than his 2015 request. He asked his followers to donate $65 million so he could purchase a Gulfstream G650 private jet, the same jet used by global CEOs and royalty. His reason? He needed it to preach the gospel more efficiently. The backlash was massive. News outlets around the world criticized him. But shockingly, many of his followers defended him, saying, "Our pastor deserves the best. Should a shepherd fly in a jet while his sheep struggle to pay rent?" In 2012, Creflo Dollar's perfect image cracked when he was arrested for allegedly choking and punching his 15-year-old daughter during an argument. Police found scratches on her neck. Although the charges were later dropped after counseling, the incident shattered the illusion of the Holy Family man. But instead of stepping back, he walked onto the pulpit just days later and told his congregation the devil was attacking him. Once again, he used faith to escape accountability. And people believed him. He continued preaching, collecting offerings, selling books, and growing his empire like nothing happened. At this point, many began asking, is the church protecting souls or protecting celebrities? For over 20 years, Creflo Dollar preached that tithing, giving 10% of income, was a requirement for salvation and financial blessing. People gave out of fear, thinking God wouldn't bless them otherwise. But in 2022, he shocked the world by saying, "Everything I taught about tithing was wrong. No apology, no refunds, just a casual pivot." Why the change? Critics believed giving was declining, and he needed a new strategy. It was the perfect rebrand. Today, he still lives in luxury, still runs a multi-million-dollar empire, and still uses emotional sermons to persuade the masses. His story proves one thing: in the dark world of megachurches, pastors can rewrite theology overnight, and people will still follow. Wiebert Angel. Prophet Wiebert Angel branded himself as the billionaire prophet, a man chosen by God to bring wealth to his followers. Founder of Spirit Embassy, later renamed Good News Church, he drew thousands with promises of supernatural financial breakthroughs. But what made him stand out wasn't just his message, it was his lifestyle. He drove Rolls-Royce cars, wore custom designer suits, and flew around the world like a celebrity. He claimed his riches were proof of divine favor. Worship services felt more like luxury brand showcases than spiritual gatherings. To his followers, he was the example of what faith could produce. But behind the velvet curtains and polished image, his empire was built on manipulation, fear, and greed. Angel mastered the art of exploiting desperation. He created something called uncommon seeds, giant financial offerings that he claimed would unlock God's blessings. People were told to give sacrificially, even if it meant using their rent money or life savings. Testimonies were staged. Miracles were exaggerated. And when nothing changed, Angel blamed the people for not having enough faith. He even declared himself a spiritual father, making his followers emotionally dependent on him. They believed that if they disconnected from him, they disconnected from God. Would you question a prophet if you were told your breakthrough depended on his approval? In 2023, Angel's carefully crafted image collapsed. Al Jazeera released an undercover investigation called Gold Mafia, where hidden cameras captured him casually planning to launder millions of dollars through Zimbabwe's gold trade using his government title as ambassador at large. He bragged he could move $200 million effortlessly through diplomatic channels. This wasn't hearsay, this was on video. The world watched in shock as a self-proclaimed man of God explained international crime like a business strategy. But the corruption went even deeper. Former church members accused him of using his prophetic authority to seduce young women, luring them with promises of spiritual promotion while hiding behind counseling sessions. Spiritual leader or predator in a tailored suit. Even after global exposure, Angel still has loyal followers who defend him fiercely. They claim he's being persecuted because he's powerful in the kingdom of God. But the facts are undeniable. He used luxury to seduce prophecy to control and faith to fund his empire. He turned the church into a financial pipeline, the pulpit into a stage, and spiritual authority into a weapon. His story is not an isolated scandal. It is the blueprint of a system where charisma replaces character and wealth is worshipped more than truth. Wiebert Angel represents the darkest version of the prosperity gospel, not just taking money, but stealing souls. Penuel Manguni. Pastor Penuel Manguni, often called the Snake Pastor, created one of the most disturbing chapters in modern church history. Leading end times disciples ministries in South Africa. He didn't preach hope, he performed horror. He ordered his followers to eat grass, swallow live snakes, drink gasoline, and even spray insecticide on their faces, claiming it would prove their faith and unlock supernatural blessings. Images of his services went viral across the world, leaving millions in disbelief. Yet his congregation cheered, cried, and obeyed with complete trust. To them, he wasn't insane, he was anointed. But this wasn't deliverance. It was psychological control disguised as spirituality. Why would people do such extreme things? Because Penuel understood something dark. Desperate people are easy to control. Most of his followers came from poor, unstable communities, where opportunity was scarce and pain was normal. They were taught that if you are still suffering, it means you don't have enough faith. Penuel weaponized this belief, convincing them that obedience to him, no matter how humiliating, was the path to breakthrough. When someone hesitated, he accused them of doubt or rebellion against God. Fear replaced logic. Loyalty replaced safety. Eventually, the world could no longer look away. Videos of followers eating snakes and collapsing in agony triggered public outrage. Health officials warned that his practices could cause death. Finally, authorities arrested Penuel Manguni for endangering human lives. But even then, he showed no remorse. He claimed persecution and said the government was attacking God's anointed. Shockingly, many of his followers defended him, insisting he had the right to perform miracles. They didn't see abuse, they saw power. It was the perfect example of how spiritual manipulation can blind people to reality, even when lives are at risk. Manguni's story is more than just shocking, it exposes a deeper problem. In many impoverished communities, the prosperity gospel has twisted faith into a performance. People are told that suffering is their fault, that if they just believe harder or obey the pastor more, God will bless them. This toxic theology creates the perfect environment for exploitation. Penuel Manguni didn't just abuse people physically, he broke them mentally and spiritually. He proved that in the dark world of megachurch-style manipulation, a pastor doesn't need a stadium or TV network to be dangerous. All he needs is access to people's pain and the authority to redefine truth. Shepherd Bushiri. Shepherd Bushiri, known as Major One, is more than just a pastor, he's a global phenomenon. The founder of enlightened Christian gathering ECG in South Africa, he attracts millions of followers from more than 20 countries with meetings broadcast live on TV and social media. Thousands line up for hours just to touch him, believing a touch can heal illnesses, erase debts, or change fate. His church is no longer a church, it was a movement. But to enter the presence of the prophet, believers must pay for VIP seats, even offering different blessing packages. For Bushiri, faith is more than a soul, it's a business model. In 2019, during a packed church service in Pretoria, a deadly stampede occurred, killing 3 women on the spot. Instead of reporting the incident to the police immediately, Bushiri allegedly hid the body for hours to avoid scandal and protect his prophet brand. When the truth was revealed, the public was outraged. How could a pastor of God consider his reputation more important than human life? But even more shocking, many of his followers still defended him, believing that the enemy was attacking the prophet. If a religious leader conceals a death to preserve his image, is that faith or crime? In late 2019, Bushiri and his wife were arrested for money laundering and fraud of over $7 million. Authorities seized assets, froze accounts, and dug deeper into the seeds of faith donations from followers. But the biggest shock came in 2020, while out on bail. Bushiri secretly fled South Africa, crossing the border into Malawi overnight, leaving the entire justice system behind. The South African government requested his extradition, but he used his political influence in his home country to secure his protection. A pastor accused of serious financial crimes, but lives like an untouchable figure. Despite being accused of indirect murder, money laundering, fraud, and fleeing justice, Shepherd Bushiri still has millions of loyal followers, calling him a man of God, the prophet of the age. Many have deposited their savings, abandoned their families, and even migrated to other countries just to be near him. This is the most terrifying dark side. When a pastor becomes an idol, followers are willing to ignore the truth to keep the dream of hope. Bushiri is proof that in the underground world of megachurches, spiritual power can surpass the laws of the land. From Detroit to Dallas, from South Africa to Hollywood, these pastors didn't just build churches, they built empires. They preached prosperity while living in mansions, demanded faith while hiding scandals, and turned sacred pulpits into billion-dollar business platforms. Some lied, some manipulated, some even risked lives, yet millions still defend them as anointed. Maybe the darkest part of this story isn't the pastors themselves, but how easily people trade truth for charisma and faith for spectacle. If the line between ministry and manipulation has completely blurred, then we must ask, are these men servants of God or architects of the greatest spiritual scam of our time? Tell me in the comments, what do you think? Legends of Black Excellence.